Former NFL GM Michael Lombardi is my special guest. We're talking all things Giants, including contracts, future moves, and all kinds of things. That interview is coming your way next on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is presented by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. Pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 10 times the amount of your money on your entry. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. That's prizepicks.com, promo code Locked On. Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On podcast family, your team every day. My name's Patricia Traina. Happy to have you with us, and I'm also happy to have the gentleman on the screen with me if you're watching on YouTube or if listening. He is Michael Lombardi. He is the host of the Lombardi Line on the VSiN network. He is a former NFL general manager, 3-time Super Bowl winning NFL executive. So he knows a few things or two about football and the game and the business side of it. And I'm really excited to talk to Michael about the business side of football because that's a topic that I'm always interested in. Michael, thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Giants podcast.
Thanks for having me. Congratulations on a great year. It's been a lot better to cover the team this year than a lot of other years, right?
Absolutely. Winning cures a lot of ails, that's for sure. Michael, I want to jump right in and I want to draw upon your experience as an NFL general manager and a man who has built some winning teams over the course of his career. When you look at the Giants, what do you think the biggest X factor is in their turnaround? I mean, this was a team that a lot of people figured, okay, not much can be expected of them, but yet they've somehow put it together. What has been the biggest X factor, do you think?
I think it's been obviously the job that Brian Daboll has done in terms of doing what the players can do. I mean, he has maximized Daniel Jones to the highest level. He's been able to get the offense to, even though, Galladay, who they paid a lot of money to, doesn't really play, been able to maximize the skill set, use Barkley to full advantage, and Martindale defensively, even though they give up a lot of yards and people can run the ball on them, they're able to play good on third down, play in the red zone, and turn the ball over. So I think it's really a combination of Brian's done a great job of how to avoid losing, not turning the ball over, and playing within themselves each and every single week and understanding their limitations. A lot of football and winning in the NFL is avoiding losing first. It's one of the preaches that Belichick talks about all the time in New England. You got to avoid losing before you can win. And I think that's where the Giants have made huge strides.
When you say avoid losing, you mean like learning how to win and how to...
No, it's how not to beat yourself, how to not turn the ball over, how to ask Daniel Jones to do things he's not really capable of doing, how to ask the offensive line to do things they're not capable of doing, or to play a defense, or to fit the scheme, or to ask the players to fit to the scheme as opposed to adapting the scheme to the players. And how do you protect the football? How do you work on those things? I think all that goes into it, because when you do those things, the other team tends to lose games. The other team tends to make the mistakes. When you get penalties in the kicking game, or you make a mistake when you decide to go for it on fourth down as opposed to kicking a field goal, those kind of things. And I think they've done a really good job. Mike Kafka, the offense coordinator, I think what Brian did a smart thing was he took a step back and he viewed the team from 35,000 feet, and he made decisions based on what's in the best interest of how can we win the game this week. Not how are we going to play offensive football all year. How are we going to win the game this week? How are we going to win on offense? How are we going to win on defense? How are we going to win the kicking game?
Okay. Yeah, he's done a really good job, and he's been consistent with the job he's done. But let me ask you about the job Joe Schoen has done, because he came into this situation. He did have a few good pieces left over, but no salary cap, had to really count on the draft. And, it looks like a solid draft, but a lot of those guys got hurt. How hard is that for a general manager to have to rebuild with the salary cap situation that the Giants had and just basically, hamstringing them?
Well, I think it's really difficult. I mean, the worst place to be is not a good team and have no cap room. And that was the New York Football Giants. I mean, they had a bad team and they had no cap room. And so Sheen walks in there, and the number one thing he did was pick the right coach, the guy that he can work hand in hand with, who shares his philosophy, who understands how to avoid losing first. So they're maximizing their talent level. I mean, I think his work has yet to come. I mean, the hiring the coach is the number one thing he did. Now the next challenge is, how do we fix the quarterback position short and long term? Is it Daniel Jones on a contract that's favorable for both parties, or does Daniel Jones want to make $45 million a year like every other quarterback? Then that becomes the art of the general managing. How does he handle that situation? Because he knows this will be the least talented team they will have under the Daboll Sheen administration, because they're going to get rid of a lot of guys. They're going to clean up some cap room. They're going to be able to move forward. So this is the worst it's going to be. And now he's got to maximize on what goes forward.
You mentioned Daniel Jones, so let's go there. I mean, basically, it seems like they threw out the first 3 years that he's played. He's had different coaches, different coordinators, different systems, no stability, no real supporting cast around him. This year, he seems to have finally taken some strides towards proving that he's a franchise quarterback. Do you think he's done enough, though, for the Giants to say, yeah, he can be our long-term answer?
Well, I don't think they threw out the first 3 years. I think what they did is they learned from what he could and couldn't do in the first 3 years. And I think Daniel Jones is a good player. And I think Daniel Jones is like a lot of players in the National Football League. They have to be managed correctly. And they've done a great job of doing that. They've not asked him to do more than he's capable. I mean, he averages 6.9 yards per attempt. They don't throw the ball down the field. They don't take chances with their offense. They don't mind a punt. They're not trying to be flashy or explosive. They know if they keep the games in the 20, they got a chance to win it. The game gets away from them, they can't. So I think it's really about they can function with Daniel Jones. I think this is a little bit like when Andy Reid went to Kansas City. He had Alex Smith. He got Alex Smith from the 49ers. And Alex Smith got him good, got him to some playoff games. But there was a limit to where he could go with Alex Smith. Then he drafted Patrick Mahomes. And all of a sudden, there goes Alex Smith, and here comes Mahomes. I think this is where the Giants are. The Giants we know who Daniel Jones is. It's good. It's not great. It's good. Is it Phil Simms? No. Is it Davis Webb's? No. It's somewhere better, but we got to be able to build around them. And then we still have to look to the future. So I think there's kind of two plans going on here. I think we'll throw the wrench in the plan if Jones comes and says, hey, I can make an X amount of dollars. I'm going to go to the market. And if he does that, then you just have to find your way to get another quarterback.
Hey, Giant fans, TurboTax experts can relieve you from the stress of preparing your taxes and filing them by the deadline so that you can enjoy life without having to lose sleep at night over whether your tax returns were filed, whether they were received, whether they were done correctly. That's right. With TurboTax, an expert will do your taxes from start to finish, ensuring that your taxes are done right, guaranteed. Visit turbotax.com/guarantees to learn more. Video meeting is required during tax preparation. Intuit TurboTax, full service products only. See turbotax.com for additional terms and conditions. Hey, Giant fans, have you ever wanted to show the NFL GMs how it's really done? Well, now you can start by hooking up with Ultimate Football GM, where you have the final say over every aspect of your roster. Among the decisions you can make include hiring the coaches and coordinators, making trades, drafting, and free agency. All of this done in a challenging and realistic game world. Ultimate Football GM is completely free and playable offline. Play on the go as you want and when you want. We at the Locked On NFL Network are already competing against each other, and we are just having such a blast. We know that you and your friends will as well. So go ahead and get started. Locked On Giants podcast listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code Locked On, that's all in caps, in the game store. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up in the app stores. Again, that's ultimate-gm.com, and that Code is locked on in all caps. Ultimate Football GM. Start your dynasty today. How hard is it going to be, though, for the Giants to make the decision, considering they're in the playoffs? I think the lowest they can draft right now is 23rd. So you're not trading up probably to get one of the top quarterbacks in this draft, given that you have all these other needs. So, I mean, does that kind of hamstring and give the Giants and give the Jones the advantage?
I mean, Andy Reid traded up to get Patrick Mahomes. Where was he in the 20s?
Did they have a more complete roster than the Giants?
Yeah, but the quarterback separates every. If you hit with the quarterback, it makes the roster a lot better, especially a quarterback that can take you to another level. I think they'll be patient. I think Jones. I would be shocked if they didn't re-sign Jones to a contract that works for him and works for them. I would, and then they're going to pursue down the road, because that makes the most sense for the team. Trying to stay where they are, but look to get better and build the team around them. They're going to have assets in terms of cap and room to go out and develop players, draft players. Every great player doesn't come from the first round. They come from all these other rounds too. So they're going to collect some talent as they go along. But I don't think you can fall in love with, we made the playoffs, so we got to pay Daniel Jones like he's Patrick Mahomes. If you do that, you really set the franchise back.
So if you were making the decision, would you go with like a shorter term deal, like maybe a 2 or 3 year deal, and maybe like, I don't know, money similar to maybe like a Carr or Tannehill, or how would you?
I think that would be fair. I think you have to have an honest conversation with the agent. Say, look, if you're interested in being paid in the top 10, this probably isn't we're going to do it. I don't know who else is. I don't know who else is going to pay him in the top 10. Remember, who are you competing against? Everybody watches the tape. Everybody sees, Daniel's done a great job protecting the football, only 5 interceptions this year. That's a huge achievement. He's fumbled, I think, 6 times. He's held on to him this year. He's still been sacked 44 times. Now, the good thing, what he's been able to do is they used him in the running game. He stayed healthy. He's been durable. He's got 120 carries on the team on the year. So there's value. There's value in what he brings to the table. It's just, you have to have that honest conversation with the agent. Is this value? It's not going to be a top 5 player. It's not going to be the Deshaun Watson contract. Not that he is a top 5 player. Or it's not going to be the Russell Wilson. If that's where we're going, who's giving you that?
So do you think there'll be a market for Daniel Jones? But you don't think it'll be, like an outrageous?
I don't think anybody's going to. I think the Giants will pay more than anybody will pay.
Okay, makes sense.
I think he means more to the Giants than he would mean to somebody else. Because
it would probably behoove him, right, to come back to be in year 2.
Excuse me?
I said it would probably behoove him to come back and play a second year in that system.
Oh, I think it definitely would. I think it would be smart for him to come back and take a short-term deal and say, okay, look, I'll do a short-term deal with good money, and then I'll prove myself and you'll have to pay me. All
right. Now, let me ask you about Saquon Barkley, because that's another lightning rod, if you will, for the Giants, a big debate. Running backs, there's some, 2 schools of thought here, that you don't pay them big money, that you can get them later in the draft. But Saquon has proven, I think, this year that he's the Saquon that they saw in 2018, his rookie season. Where do you see the Giants potentially going with him? What would you do if it was your call?
Well, I think this is a hard one because he's a really good player, but he's at a position where there's a lot of good players. And the way I always try to classify this is does he qualify as a weapon? Because you just can't pay a runner other than Derrick Henry, who didn't break the bank either now. You can't just pay a runner. You've got to pay a weapon. Kamaro's a weapon. Dalvin Cook's a weapon. When I mean weapon, they impact the kicking, they impact the passing game as much as they do the running game. In fact, more. Barkley leads the team in catches with 57. He averages 5.9 yards a catch. That's not really good. When you're really, like last year, Kamara averaged 9.6 a catch. McCaffrey's in the 9s. You want more out of him in the passing game. And so if you give him this contract, you've got to see him as a weapon. Now, he's going to make his money because people will pay him, but people will only pay him as a weapon. And he's a really talented player. So it's that fine line you have to go. Again, I think the Giants will pay more to keep him than he probably would get in the open market. But there's teams with cap room that see him. The problem is also you're buying a position on a second contract. And typically these running backs, when they get to that second contract, don't always go through that second contract. He's going to have over 300 carries this year. That's a lot of mileage on the back with over 60 catches. That's a lot, that starts to add up. And it's usually a position that you don't want to long-term yourself lock into.
Michael, when we talk about contracts for players, people, and specific to Barkley, people say, well, he's going to probably want Christian McCaffrey money, which is, I think, like a little over 16 million per year APY. But there are things that could be done to boost up a contract. Can you just take us through the thought process when you're trying to appease a player, but also not blow your salary cap out? What are some of the things that can be done to kind of boost up the APY without, really killing the cap, if you know what I mean?
Well, I think what you see a lot is when we start March and Adam Schefter and Ian Rappaport, and they all start reporting the contracts, those averages per year come from the agents would boost the number up. No team or player, really, they only value what the 3 years of the contract is. Even if I give you a 5-year contract, it's the first 3 years of the deal that matter. It matters in terms of guaranteed money, and it matters in terms of average per year. And if you're going to go into this, if you give a lot of money on guarantee, then there's a lot of dead money that could follow you down the road. And that's what locks you into the player. And so you can't make a decision because you can't afford Russell Wilson. We just gave him all this guaranteed money. We can't cut him this year. We're stuck with him, and so that limits your flexibility. So you can boost up the average per year. That's easy. You just add a lot of phony years to the back end of the contract. But the agents are too smart for that. They know that everything's valued over 3 years of the deal. No matter how long the contract is, it's really everybody who's studying it in the industry is only looking at 3 years.
Are they also looking at things like incentives? Are they more receptive to incentives, or are they kind of like, nah, let's just talk about guaranteed money?
No, I think it's all about, there's two things you're negotiating, average per year. Well, actually 3 things. You're negotiating the first 3 years of how much money is guaranteed. You're also talking about what is the total average per year in 3 years, and how much of the percent of the guarantee is over the length of the contract. So if Deshaun Watson, for example, the whole problem with Lamar Jackson not having a contract is Deshaun Watson, because Lamar Jackson wants a full guarantee. Deshaun Watson got one. Why shouldn't I get one? Well, the Ravens don't want to give him one. So that's a problem. And so that's kind of how it works.
Hey, Giant fans, playing daily fantasy based on player projections has never been easier when you visit prizepicks.com. Pick 2 to 5 players, and if they go on to score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you win up to 10 times the amount of your money on any entry. There's no competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. Prize Picks is currently operational in over 30 states and in Canada, and they offer projections on every sport. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less, and Prize Picks offers safe and fast withdrawals. Download the Prize Picks app today or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. Don't forget to enter that promo code Locked On at sign up at prizepicks.com. Hey, Giant fans, thanks so much for making a Locked On Giants podcast your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL podcast, bringing you the local insights that you love to the national spotlight with daily conversations on the biggest NFL stories. Locked On NFL, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Do you think that contract, though, with Watson getting a fully guaranteed contract, is that going to have a ripple effect? You mentioned with Jackson it is, but what about with other, big name players like a Saquon or, other quarterbacks
Absolutely.
that are coming down the pipe?
That's why we saw the owners come out. Steve Bisciotti, the owner of the Ravens, was against it. Every owner was upset that for the first time in the history of the NFL, a team broke the full guarantee rule. Not that it was a rule, but that posture. And they did it for a player that was suspended. They did it for a player that missed a year of football. They did it for a player that had off the field problems, and it's the wrong thing to do, and it was the wrong thing to do, and now everybody else is going to have to deal with it.
Turning to the Giants defense, I mean, when you look at the job Wink Martindale has done, and I got to imagine he doesn't have everything he needs, and he's also had some injuries there. What do you think of the job that he's done, and what's the next level for this defense, do you think?
Well, I mean, I love Don. I was with Martindale when he first entered the league with the Oakland Raiders. We hired him his first NFL job. I think he's a great coach, and I think he's developed into a great strategist in terms of his game planning. And I think he sees the big picture of the game. I think most defensive coordinators who gave up 5.3 yards per carry would be upset. Wink understands that the running game is never going to beat him. It's going to be giving up, stopping people in the red zone. So he's a really good situational coach. And he's really, the strength of his talents lie in the ability to attack the protections of the opponent. So when the offense is trying to throw the ball, Wink has very good ability to attack what they want to do with their protection schemes and get a free runner. Whenever you watch a football game, the key isn't who's when they say, well, they blitzed. Well, if they blitzed and everybody gets blocked, is it really a blitz? And of course not. The only way it works is when somebody runs free. And the way you run free is when you attack the protections within the scheme. And that's what Wink does a really good job of. I think he's great. I think he was a great coach. I find that really, truly unbelievable. But somebody who's proven over time how successful he's been, he can't even get a head coaching interview. Because I see him as a Bill Parcells type of coach. I really do. Parcells was the linebacker coach of the Giants, the defense coordinator. George Young promoted him to the head coach, had the bad first season, and one of the greatest coaches of all time. There's a lot of similarities, not the hairstyle, but a lot of similarities between Wink and Parcells.
I was just going to ask you about that, actually. I mean, do you think the league is just gravitated more to the offensive-minded coaches as opposed to the defensive-minded coaches? Or
I mean, I don't know. I can't speak for it. But we know this. They don't watch tape. They don't understand what they're seeing, so that's why they wouldn't interview them. I mean, if you ask Aaron Rodgers or you ask Tom Brady, you ask any of the good quarterbacks who gives them the most problems, they'll probably say Wink, Baltimore or the Giants this year. But people don't want that. They want somebody that's going to win a press conference as opposed to win games.
That's kind of, I guess you look at, some of the coaches around the league that had that charisma and stuff like that,
Well, he's got charisma. I mean, I don't see why,
Yeah, he does.
The guy, he's got, he's good. But I think what's happened, a lot of time people like to label you, right? So because he comes from the Buddy Ryan tree, he gets labeled as Rex Ryan when he's not Rex Ryan. Mm-hmm. And people put that label on you in the NFL, and I know it as well as anybody. When you get labeled, whether it's fair or unfair, you can get labeled as a hard worker and never come to work, and you'll be a hard worker for the rest of your life. You get labeled as lazy, and even if you show up every day and work your ass off, you're lazy. It's all labeled, and I think that's what's happened to him.
It's unfortunate because he is very creative. I mean, every week it just seems like he has a different scheme that
which give Brian credit as the head coach. Brian deserves a lot of credit because Brian comes from the week-to-week game plan school. A lot of coaches don't. And where Joe last year, Joe Judge, Joe didn't really understand all of these things we're talking about from that perspective, from how can I fix the offense? How do I step back? And, and let's face it, Brian has put together a much better staff than Joe did. I mean, Joe went with Jason Garrett and a line coach that they couldn't really figure it out. That cost them. Oftentimes when a head coach loses his job, it's probably because he made a couple bad hires in his first staff.
And that, of course, I think is fair to say about Joe Judge. Mike, final question for you. The Giants obviously have had a year that has surpassed, I think, a lot of people's expectations. The challenge becomes maintaining and building on it, which sometimes is hard to do. You hit that sophomore slump or that wall or so forth. What does this team need to do? I mean, obviously they need to add a few more pieces, but what else can they do to ensure that they build on this as opposed to taking a step back?
Well, I mean, they probably will take a step back because what's going to happen is the schedule's going to get harder, right? And teams are going to add, and so they will. And so they might take a step back in the record, but they may be a better team. And so I think that's what you have to prepare for. I think you have to have that mentality that, look, yeah, we won a lot of close games. I mean, we won a lot of close games and the ball went our way in a lot of different directions. And next year we might not win as many close games, but we know who we are and we're going to play that way. And we're going to continue to play the way we play. What Brian is doing is developing an identity. And within that identity is that continues to grow. And when we win close games, when we play to our identity, it really helps us out. So I would be not looking at I think the scoreboard is the last thing. Bill Walsh wrote a book called The Score Takes Care of Itself. And that's true. And I think in this case, even that they go to the playoffs, I think there's a mindset that we're really not a great team. We're in the playoffs, but we're not a great team. We need to get better. Like this is like, as I said to you earlier in this podcast, this should be the worst team talent-wise that we have here moving forward.
Well, hopefully brighter skies ahead for the Giants. They do make the playoffs this year. We'll see how far they go. And then the fun's just going to get started. So, Mike, I want to thank you for coming on the podcast with me. I appreciate the insight and your expertise. Folks, you can find him at the Lombardi Line on the VSiN network. It's the sports betting network. I'll put the information in the show notes where you can find the show and the network and all that stuff. You can follow him on Twitter. I'll have that for you all on the screen and as well as in the show notes. Mike, again, thank you so much for coming on with me and sharing your insight, and all the best to you this year.
Thank you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Thank you.